What is going on, gamers? Welcome back to more Total War Rome 2 tier list. Today I'll be doing the Syracuse faction. Now this is based on my opinion on legendary and very hard battle difficulty. When I do my tier list, I think about the units that would be good in an army and what units would also be good to fight throughout the entire battle, not just a portion of it. So if you take the javelins for an example, they are good until you use their ammo up, and then they kind of fall off from there. So I don't usually prioritize javelins high in the list at all. I usually like to prioritize stuff with a lot of ammo so that way they can get their full potential throughout the whole fight. Syracuse is a pretty boring faction to play, and especially their units, a lot of them are kind of boring as well, but they do start out in a pretty tough spot if you're unlucky. So you got Rome next to you, you've got Carthage, and just down here is Egypt. So sometimes they'll actually send a navy up this way. But your two big contenders are Rome and Carthage. Syracuse is mainly a hoplite faction. They do have one sword unit, but we'll start off with the militia hoplites here. You recruit these guys right away with any settlement at all, but they're garbage. We're gonna throw this D tier. These guys are only better than the Libyan hoplites that Carthage has, but if you go up against Rome, these guys are gonna get instantly slaughtered. Now we got the light hoplite. These guys are recruited alongside the Greek hoplites, which is this is a tier 1, and light hoplites are really only good for chasing down like ranged units, like really crappy ones, but they have zero melee potential. I put them in the same category as the militia hoplites. They're not very good. And then we got the Greek hoplites. So when you're going up against either Carthage or Rome, they are not too bad until mid game. It's really once you start going to like the barbarians or getting around Egypt do you have to really worry. But I would throw these guys in B tier. Next up is the Thurios hoplites. So these are a tier 3 unit. They are actually a little bit worse than the regular Greek hoplites. They have a little bit less melee defense, a little bit less health, and they cost us like 10 or 20 less gold, but they're not as good as the Greek hoplites. These guys you can recruit with a tier 1 barracks. These ones you need a tier 3, so it's no brainer. These guys are going to go C tier. They're not as good. Now we got the Thurio spears. These are not really that good of a unit. They do have javelins, which is a plus, but they do lack a lot of melee attack. For that, I'll throw the C tier. You can have these guys like chase down range units, kind of. They're not like heavy units by any means, but they're not really that great, so I'm going to stick them in the C tier. Recruited in the same tier 3 barracks, you can get the Thorax swordsmen, which are a way better option than the Greek hoplites. They don't have as much melee defense. Sword units usually don't have as much melee defense as hoplites, but they do more melee attack, and they also have javelins, which I like to prioritize units with javelins as well, like melee infantry with javelins, which is it's extremely OP because not only can you get that first volley of javelins against other infantry, but you can also use them as a counter to cavalry. So the Thorax swordsmen, they are a decent melee unit. A lot of the Thorax units are like a good value unit. They're not really like better over another unit per se, but I think they're a good value. However, unfortunately, I'm only going to throw them in the B tier. When you go up against like the barbarians or even Egypt, if you didn't get too far, you are actually going to struggle. Like the chosen swordsman, for example, will actually destroy these guys here, unfortunately. And when you go to Egypt, they have way more powerful units. You're good starting off with these guys and then switching over to these guys. Speaking of the Thorax units, this is the Thorax hoplites. Now, this is a tier 4 unit, and for a tier 4 hoplite, this is actually not very good at all. He has a decent melee defense, obviously, over the Thorax swordsman here, but I would still prioritize the Thorax swordsman over higher melee defense because more damage and javelins is way better than higher melee defense. And for a tier 4, like I said, not very good. I'm actually going to throw these in C tier. Now for Syracuse's signature unit, which I like to call the pickled hoplites or the picked hoplites. So these are your best units that you're going to get. They are not by any means bad hoplites. And I'm going to compare these guys to Sparta because they're literally right next door. And Sparta is like the staple best hoplites in the game. So these guys are not as good as the Royal Spartans, but they are still good hoplites. I'm going to throw these A tier. So now we've got the Pikemen, which there's really one option, the Greek Pikemen. These guys are absolutely viable from as soon as you recruit them to the end of the game. I'm going to throw them B tier. They're nothing too special, but Pikemen in the game are extremely broken. Now we've got the Jav Cav. So we have the skirmisher cavalry here, and I want to show you real quick why these guys are not very good. So when you're even going to the recruiting section, they're just not good in general, but you actually need a tier 3 skirmish camp to recruit these guys. And if you look at the tier 2, this is giving you archers, so there's really no point upgrading this to a tier 3 unless you wanted the archers as the garrison. And if you look at the tier 3 hoplite barracks, you get the Tarentine literally right there. So the skirmisher cav, they are not even worth getting at all. They're not very good. And you have the Tarentine, which are, you know, your decent Jav Cav. those guys, I would throw them in the same tier as the actual Citizen Cav. But as for the Skirmisher Cav, freaking right in the D tier. This cavalry unit here is the Hippeus Lancers. These are a tier 4 unit, and for a tier 4 shot cav, they lack actually a lot of a charge bonus on them. They're not by any means like a very bad cavalry. You're eventually going to have to recruit these over the Citizen Cav or even mercenaries, because Citizen Cav is just going to fall off completely. But these guys, I'm going to throw them in the B tier. Now we're getting to the range units. So we have the Greek Archers. So the Greek Archers do have a higher missile damage over your average, but they have average range. They are one of my go-to picks when it comes to range units because they have the ability to arc their arrows over like buildings and stuff. So they are far superior in many ways over different units. I'm going to throw these guys actually in a B tier. The next two units you see are the Greek Slingers and the Greek Javelin Men. The Greek Slingers are one of the worst, if not the worst slingers in the game you can actually recruit. If you look at the Celtic Slingers, which are just north of you, they are actually way better. Well, not way better per se, but they can actually withstand a slinger fight. Not only do the Celtic Slingers have a little bit more armor, but they also have a bigger shield. These slingers are going to go in the C tier, and your regular, this is like your garbage Greek Javelin Men. These are going in the actual D tier. The last two range units you see are the Light Pelotist and the Pelotist. When you try to go to recruit them, you start off with the regular Pelotist. And in order to get the Light Pelotist, you have to actually do some reforms, which is the Mercenaries, which is quite far up in the tree. As you can see, the Light Pelotist replaces the Pelotist. The difference between the two is one's got more armor, and the other one's got quicker reload speed, and also has the quick reload ability, which is kind of good in a way if you want to use ammo pretty quick. And I can throw them both in the C tier. All right, now for the last three units. These are your general options. You have the Greek Hoplite, the Pickle Boys, and the Hippeus Lancers. So for your general unit being a regular Hoplite, which is not a very good general in my opinion, because your generals are kind of like your last line of defense, or you know, when shit hits the fan you got to send someone in. Having a regular Greek Hoplite for a general is not very good, so I'm actually going to bump it down a tier. I'll put the Pickled Hoplites though at the same one because they're decent units, and then I'll put the Hippeus Lancers in the same tier as the regular Hippeus Lancers. All right, this is my tier list for the Syracuse faction. Like I mentioned earlier, Syracuse is kind of a boring faction to play. They only have one unique unit. If you wanted to play a spear faction, I would suggest playing a Sparta because they are way more unique and way more fun to play as opposed to Syracuse. Syracuse does start in a unique spot. They've got Rome and Carthage between you, and if you look at Sparta, they have an even more unique spot because they've got 4 factions around you that could declare war against you. But anyways, thanks for watching. Peace out.